Hey, welcome back to the channel. DIY Dad here. Today we are out in the garage because we're going to do a little bit of work on the DeLorean, doing a bit of engine dress up. So I have a cover plate kit that's going to cover up the throttle spool, as well as a blanking plate that goes there, but all of that is kind of a problem because right here is a wiring harness that's in the way. So what we're going to do is take apart the top of this motor a little bit, see if we can reposition that wiring harness and get those plates installed. If this all goes poorly, consider this a precautionary tale. Here we go. We'll do the cooking show version of this, so clearly this project will be successful, and here's the end result of it. If you're curious about this little PRV label, you can buy them on my Etsy store, which you'll find in the description of this video. All right, so here's what we're looking at with the motor. So this is the PRV 2.8 liter motor on the DeLorean, and there's this wiring harness that comes off the alternator here and runs up over the top and then goes back here. And the problem is I have a cover plate that goes here, which I could install just fine. I have another one, however, that goes right there, and it would look a lot nicer if this wasn't in the way. So we're going to figure out how to reroute this, and I think what we can do is route this bundle of wires down in this space under the airbox. It looks like there's going to be enough room. We'll have to disassemble a few things to tuck it in there, so we're going to do this piece at a time. So that means taking off this Y pipe, and it means taking off the airbox. Now with the Y pipe, there are paper gaskets in here, as well as a couple rubber like washers that sit down in here. You're going to want to get replacements of those before you do this. You can get those from DeLorean Go. I think DeLorean Midwest sells a kit as well, so make sure you buy your replacement parts before you get into this. So I'm going to get the airbox removed. To take the airbox off, there's 3 bolts. So 1, 2, 3. And then this little breather hose pulls off the side, and this intake hose pulls out of there, and then this whole thing should lift up and out of the way. All right, so I've got the screws removed. These were just 10 millimeter bolts that held this down. It's worth noting that the one in the back, so the one that goes back here, is a little bit longer than the others. So you have 2 that match. Those are the ones that go right here and here, and the one that's slightly longer goes in the back. All right, now we'll pull that out of the way. Airbox is out of the way, so that hose just popped off, and the breather hose, got that set off to the side here, and then I'm using this little box to maintain all of my screws. So all the 3 screws for this are in that little container. I like this box a lot. I think I got this from Harbor Freight, but it's a neat little case that allows you to pull these out. So you can have these individual trays where you're working and then move them back here and keep everything together. And if you get halfway through your project and have to stop, you just close the lid and walk away. So pretty cool thing. All right, so now that that is done, let's look at what else we're looking at here. So I can kind of see how this wiring harness could sit, right? It can kind of run here and run around this and then come down. The problem, of course, as I mentioned before, is going to be the Y pipe. So I'm going to have to pull that out of the way. Aside from that, though, it looks like once the Y pipe's out of the way, we'll be able to go down. Now the throttle's going to be in the way as well. So we'll get this moved and then we'll see what we have to do there, because my thought is that I'm going to run the harness down probably under this, or maybe over, just making sure it doesn't impede the flow of the throttle cable, but run it through that gap right there and then have it come up either here or on the other side and run back and over. So that's our goal, and we'll see how that works. Let me break in here just to cover this, to make sure this is very, very clear. This is working on the motor of the car, which is dangerous territory. You're going to be messing with electrical, so you want your 12 volt battery line disconnected, so everything should be off. But if at any point this feels like something you don't want to do yourself, don't. Okay, I'm not a mechanic. I've been working on cars for 20 plus years, and I'm relying on basic mechanical knowledge for what I can and can't do here, but I don't know if this is a bad idea. So please, if you're nervous about following any of the advice or methods, let's say, in this video, don't, right? Consult a professional. I think this is going to work. I can't see why it wouldn't, but I mean, who knows? Okay, removing the Y pipe then is going to be 4 11mm bolts. So there's 2 here, 2 here, and then this one in the center, and that should allow you to pull this free. You're also going to need to unclip the harness from this hold down, kind of free that up. Everything else should be open. You can see how it kind of wiggles around with those 4 removed. So once I get that guy off, we'll be able to pull this free. All right, here's that last center bolt, and you can see the washer that was on it actually broke right in half. The other half is laying right down there, so I'll replace that before I put this back together, obviously. So I'll wiggle this guy out. There are 2 kind of round rubber gaskets down here that are going to be holding it, so you just got to sort of work it a little bit. Okay, that's removed. Didn't put up any fight at all. There are 2 rubber gaskets on the inside, and then these 2 flat ones as well. You're going to replace all 4 of those, but the way that they go, just for later orientation, rubber goes on the inside, clear one goes on the outside then, and then this pushes in kind of against that clear piece and then through the rubber. So not too bad. Now, looking at this, as I mentioned, the next issue is going to be getting this under here, because the rest of it looks like we'll be able to pretty easily maneuver. I have to see how it's going to bend and what kind of protest it's going to put up, but I think without unwrapping this that we can get it to maneuver down and around. But once it gets here, we have an issue. So I can unclip this guy to allow that to move, but this arm assembly is going to be in the way. So looking at it, it looks like I should be able to run right through here, kind of underneath, and keep this away from the throttle and everything. Now I don't want it to hit the valve covers, so I'll leave these connections in place, but I should be able to come down from there under here, I think, and then probably down around the bell and up. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So I'm going to use both my hands here to see what I can do for repositioning back here without straining things too much. Looks like I can move it. And then once we get that in place, we'll figure out what we're doing here. Okay, we're getting closer. So this bolt's removed, it's just an 11mm. In order to get this to move enough for me to get the wire under it, I'm being very careful because there's a solid rod here that actually connects to the throttle, and I'm being very careful not to bend that. But in order to get this to move, I'm going to have to take off the 2 bolts down here as well that hold the other side of the bracket. So I've got one of them removed. The other is pretty tight in there, so I'm using a box wrench to get that guy off. Once that's off, I should kind of have enough room to kind of maneuver things around to get this in there, I think. I do need it slightly more slack though, and what's stopping that is this cable tie right down here. So I'm going to cut that guy as well, and it looks like that'll give me a little bit of extra slack from that little kind of V down there, which will then give me enough room to pull this back, and I'll re-zip tie it later. So I'm going to cut that, and then we'll see if that worked. Okay, with that zip tie clipped and this sort of pulled forward gently, kind of as far as we can do it, and then this pulled up as far as we can go, I have just enough where you see I'm going to be able to get around this throttle. So I'm going to kind of work it very gently, again because of this rod down here. And I'm going to work this underneath and position it right above the water pump hose right here and under that bracket. That'll keep it away from these because I really don't want to risk impacting the travel of this. Now if I find that this doesn't reconnect, then unfortunately I'm going to have to disconnect this so I can run it between here and have it come out and then go around. But we're going to try to go underneath and see if that works. Okay, I think this actually works. So I was able to route under here. You can see it's running right between this bracket and the upper water pump hose here. I haven't reconnected it into this, but once I do, that'll stand it up off of the valve covers. It is pretty tight in here. I have a little extra room if I have to come out and then come up through here, I can, which will get us further away from the throttle linkage. We'll see. But I think I'll be able to snug everything down and have enough room for everything to line up, because it looks like I'm lined up as it is. So The next thing I'm going to have to do then is this is going to be too short, and I want this plug to stay accessible, I think, without requiring me to disassemble stuff. So I'm going to clip this cable tie as well, and then run this plug up here so I can plug it in over here. And then I believe the blanking plate that I'm using is going to require removing these and replacing these bolts for the standoff, but we'll get to that. First, let's just get the wiring in place. But you can kind of see I'm routed here, comes around this bracket and down alongside the intake, and under the Y, across, and then over. I think that's going to work. So I'm going to get this kind of rebuttoned up and then we'll see. Okay, so here's our final routing. Got everything clipped back in. I did end up putting this plug down. I didn't like it when it was here. It was too close to the throttle action, so that's out of the way. But you can see with this in place, like none of this impacts the throttle at all. It actually sits kind of down next to the hose. There's just enough room for it where it's not like crimped. It's just sort of sitting in there. You can see I can move it. It's loose. So it should be good there. I kind of have it running inside of this little hook. And I think we're going to be good without having to take this off. And like I said, I'll kind of evaluate if it looks like these are getting scorched or there's something happening with it being this close to the radiator hose, but I can't see that being a problem. So we should be good there. This plug, as I said, is pushed down. Cable in comes up and back like that. You can see how much cleaner that is already. I haven't put this bolt back in because the cover plate has a bracket that attaches to that. So I'm going to do that later. I'm going to get my new gaskets and get this installed and kind of put back together, and then we'll deal with the dress-up plates. Okay, our Y pipe is reinstalled. Everything is retightened down as far as my brackets go, except for this bolt right here, because we're going to need that for this cover plate. So I'm going to go grab that kit. But there's a bracket that sits on top of this that screw is going to go through. So here's the throttle spool kit from Delorean Parts Northwest. I think they might be the only ones who make this particular design, but essentially this piece sits like this and will match up to your Y pipe, give you a really kind of cool, clean, sleek look. And then that covers up the throttle spool. Now in order for this to get attached, there's a bracket. That bracket's going to lay right on here with these tabs faced up like that, and then there's two little screws that are going to hold this in place. So bracket goes on here like that, gets all tightened down, then the cover plate lays on top of it, these screws get threaded in. Okay, we'll get the bracket loosely installed. So I'm leaving the bolt loose a little bit so that we can align this plate. So you kind of set this over the top, get it lined up with the screws, and then you can do your fine adjustments to make sure that that's lined up where you want it to be. There's a little bit of play on the screw intentionally, so you can kind of move it around. So once you get it lined up where you know you're going to want it to be, carefully remove this plate, and then snug that screw down, and then you can screw that in. Okay, here's the installed throttle cover, or the throttle spool cover. Really nice, super clean fit. Love that a lot. So now we're going to do the throttle body cover. This blanking plate covers this space right here. We're going to remove this clip because we don't need this anymore now that our wiring harness doesn't run across there. So we'll pull this off. And then in order to mount it, we have two different brackets. One has a single post on it. It's this guy. That's going to be your forward bracket. That goes roughly here, like this. So we're going to take off those two bolts down there, which hold this throttle assembly. So we're going to go real slow and careful in that one. And then the other one holds the back two, and that's going to bolt on, I believe, right here. Although looking at it, it may be this back one here, which would be even more convenient. So we'll see. I think it mounts to the front, but we'll test that as we go. So I'm going to get this guy out of the way, and then we'll mount the front one, and then figure out where the back one goes. Okay, hold down is released. Now we're going to do this back bracket. I did find the instructions, and it is going to be this rearmost screw on the blanking plate that the front one attaches to. So got this out of the way, retightened that. Now for the back bracket, to avoid moving this as much as possible, I'm going to do this one at a time. These are 10mm screws, bolts. So I'm going to take one of these out and sort of loosely attach this bracket, but let it kind of rotate out of the way. And then I'll take the other one out, rotate it forward, connect it, and then tighten everything back down. So just do them one at a time to avoid moving any of this. It's 10mm pretty simple and straightforward from the looks of it. Okay, here's the rear bracket installed. Now what they recommend that you do in the instructions, which I agree, is to actuate the throttle spool and just look at the action here. So do it a few times, get used to the movement and how things clear and what things look like. And then when you reconnect everything and have this loosely attached, you want to do the same thing and make sure that the switches are getting actuated and that all of this is moving freely like it was before. So I'm now lined up pretty good, so I'm going to tighten these guys in. And then the rear bracket is going to go in that screw right there, which is also a 10mm bolt, sorry. Okay, rear bracket is attached, and just like before, you're going to leave it a little bit loose so that you can position this on top of it and get your final adjustments. So you see mine's pretty close, but I need to twist it just slightly. So get that lined up, and then we'll snug that down, and then this plate can get reattached. Both of the rear blanking plates are now installed. Everything looks super clean. I'm very happy with this. Now we'll get the airbox reinstalled, and then we'll fire her up, make sure nothing's rattling, and everything looks all right. All right, and here is the finished product all put back together. So not too bad. If you were just installing these cover plates, that's a super easy thing to do. Rerouting the wires is a little bit trickier, but everything did go back fully clearance. Nothing was pushing on the wiring looms at all. So I think we're good there. My intention is to run it like this for a while, and then I'll check back in a month or so, kind of take some of this off and make sure that there's no sign that the wires are being impacted by the heat or anything, but I really don't think they should be the way that they're sitting. Nothing's really touching the motor directly. The side of the wiring harness does touch the inside of the intake runner here, but it was laying on top of it before, so I don't think that's a big deal, or they would have had it stood up and stood off. So pretty impressed with that, and love the look of the dressed up motor. Much nicer. So that's going to wrap us up for this one. Not a hard project at all. I really like the cover plates from Delorean Northwest. Really cool product, very clean, really well refined. I love how it looks. I mean, there's a bunch of throttle spool covers. Most of them kind of come out and then go down like that. This is just a much nicer look, kind of lined up with the engine. It's beautiful. And then, yeah, much cleaner, much happier, ready for car show season. So this being the end of a DIY dad project, I of course owe you a dad joke. So what's the difference between bird flu and swine flu? Bird flu requires treatment, swine flu requires ointment. All right, remember, with any DIY project, most important step is just to do it. Doesn't have to be perfect. No one's going to see the flaws unless you point them out to them. Those of you driving, stay safe on the road. Catch you on the next video. Remember to like and subscribe. Bye.